All right. So what we're going to talk about this evening is speaking and community involvement for the introverts. Now, I've done this presentation in a couple different ways, and this is one that I'm prepping for a conference that I'm doing in New York City in December. And so I'm kind of giving some new slides in here and some new parts to this. So I'm hoping for feedback, and I'm hoping for a good discussion this evening around this too, so that people can get the ideas here. But basically the idea behind this presentation is that we really need to be involved in the community. You need to speak, you need to get out there into your local users groups, and here's some of the reasons why, and here's some of the things you can do as an introvert to do these things. Because believe it or not, I am an introvert. A lot of people say there's no way Pat is an introvert. He's been running events for 11 years. He's been doing all these things. How on earth could this person be an introvert? Well, the truth is, in a lot of ways, I am. And that's a key thing that I've learned to deal with and work with, even though I am an introvert. And I'll talk a lot about those stories here in just a minute. So as I go through this, please ask questions. For those of you on the call, I'm not gonna, you can unmute yourself. If I do hear background noise or anything, I'll mute you, but otherwise just unmute. I can see your pictures up here too, so if you raise your hand in the chat, that's fine as well, that'll work. Either one of those things to ask me a question, just go ahead and ask it. Don't wait for anything to come up. Okay, this is about me. Now, the other part of this presentation is we're going to talk about why you should be in the community, why you should be involved, and then how you can actually get started in presentations. So some of this talk will be actually about things that you want to do in your presentation, how to set up your slides, how to put an abstract. All of these things are included in this presentation. So we'll start with this one right here as the author slide. I always suggest that you have a slide like this. And there's a few key elements you always want on this slide. You always want contact information. How can they get a hold of you? You always want a picture on here, okay? Now, people ask me about this is why should there be a picture? There should be a picture because if you just download the slides later on, you're not exactly sure who it was that was talking. Maybe you'll run into them at another event in the future and you won't even recognize them. You won't even know who that person was. Having that picture as a reference is a great way to remember who that was and who was talking. Okay, so a picture is a good idea here. If you can get a great profile picture done, wonderful. This was done during my family photos a couple years back. It's a great way to get a good profile photo. Then also just talk about yourself, which is very hard to do, but always add some things in here that are good for you to talk about and good to tell you about. Don't use Halloween costumes fits. That's a great idea. Don't use Halloween costumes. If you want to throw in some funny pictures in here as well, that's fine, but get a good profile picture as well. So I also talk about, I've been working with data for a long time. I'm an avid volunteer and I'm an avid picture taker. If you're doing a technical presentation on something specific, add more bullet points that are related to those specific items, okay? So if you are really good at database engineering and you've been doing it for a long time, maybe mentioning something right there. Since this presentation is not highly technical in nature, I did not put a lot of technical bullet points into this part, okay? So this is the basic idea of behind speaker author. Any questions around this? Yes.
Just curious, how I am assuming that, you put your Twitter handle on there, you're pretty active on Twitter. It's not just like, yeah, here it is. I don't do anything with it, but there it is kind of thing. That's my assumption. Is that correct?
I'm not as active as I used to be. When I was in the SQL Server community, which was a much bigger thing, there was a lot more activity around Twitter and what it was used. So knowing your community and what they use is a good idea. Like you could put, there's definitely some Slack things out there. There's Slack communities out there. There's Discord out there. You can put those contact informations in here as well. Knowing who you're talking to is a good idea. I will probably adjust this slide for when I'm doing the New York City one for things related to Postgres. So yes, absolutely. It should be contact information you want to use more than anything else, that you want people to reach out to you with. Okay. All right. So let's start talking about this whole why do you care? This is one of the key things I do in almost all of my presentations. I talk about why. And a lot of that reason I talk about why is because of Simon's quotes right there. These are important things that you really need to figure out is why is this so important to you? Why should you be part of the community? And obviously the easiest, simplest answer to that is that the community in the future can give you a job. I mean, it's very, very simple. I knew someone many, many years ago that they started a users group in the area, and the only reason they started the user group was to get a job. Okay, now that's the wrong reason. Please don't do that. But it is one reason to do it is to get a job or to get future career opportunities, to meet other people. That is a reason to do it, but you really need to find your reason. For me personally, I love to help people. My goal in life is to help people. So for me to do that, I have to present, I have to share, I have to train, I have to put on events. That's why I do what I do. Okay, so it's a big part of my why to help and to participate in things like this. You have to figure out what is the big part of your why about why you're doing that. But I can tell you right now, as an introvert, you might say to yourself, the last thing I want to do is get up and talk to people. But if your why drives you enough to say, but if I can do this, then I can benefit myself so much more in the community, and I can get a future job, future money, future career opportunities, then you have a good reason to do that. Okay, so you have to think about these things. And I'm going to talk about the steps that you should do to tell yourself to get yourself psyched for this. Now, the second question that a lot of people ask is, why are you putting these photos on your slides here? What does this mean? Again, this is my photography. This is one of my passions. And I bring this up because I'm very passionate about my photography. And one of the reasons I do it is because it gives me time as an introvert to be by myself, or to relax, or to have that time all to myself. And that's one of my ways of refreshing and getting back into restoring my time. So it's really important to me to say my why is also about photography for me. It's one of my passions, and it's one of the reasons I do this. I can do this because then I can go and take my camera and take beautiful pictures and take my time and do those things. So this is the whole reason about why. Any questions on that?
Side question.
Yes.
The photograph on the right, how do you get the slight streaming on the water that way?
Okay, so my
High
right
exposure?
My right is a waterfall, my left is the crack. Are you talking about the crack?
I'm talking about the waterfall.
Okay, the waterfall is a long exposure using a neutral density filter, and it was taken at about, I think, 20 seconds. The interesting thing behind that picture, and all my pictures, is they have a story behind them. And that story was that right after I took that picture, I fell in the river, hurt my head, lost my glasses, and walked down that hike with sunglasses on the whole time. So
you sacrificed for your art.
Yes, yes. Well, the one on the left has even got a bigger story, but we'll keep going and I'll tell the story later if you want to hear the story. The one on the left is 100% more story than that. So, okay. Any other questions about the why? The why should really be driving you. And if you have questions of what your why is or anything, Simon is your best bet for this. Simon has written a book, and there is a book out there on a process on how to find your why. It's actually called Find Your Why. I read it recently. It was a very interesting book, a very interesting idea and concept. Little hard to pull off. I'll be honest, it's going to be really hard to do. But if you're someone that's trying to figure out, why am I really doing this? Why am I really trying to do these things? I think that's a great book to start with. It's called Find Your Why. Okay. Okay, so now we've said we really feel like we should do something. What are we going to do? And I'm an introvert, so how do I overcome these terrible things? How do I overcome the absolute fear of doing what I am doing right now, standing up here presenting to you? How do you overcome it? You do it with 20 seconds of courage. This comes from a very old movie. Well, not a very old movie, but it was a wonderful show called We Bought a Zoo. And that show has Brad Pitt, I believe, is the lead actor in it. And he talks about a point in that show where he said, it took me 20 seconds of courage to walk across the diner to say hello to your mother and change my life forever. So meaning that as soon as you make that first step, you can also take this as the first step. As soon as you take that first step, as soon as you do that first thing, that's all it takes, is that amount of courage. Then once you've done it, you're going to feel much better about it. Once you start talking up on stage, once you start to submit your presentation, you're going to feel much better about it as soon as you get to that point. You just have to get over that very, very first big step. And that's where it comes down to 20 seconds of courage on how to get over that big step. And I will talk about the presentation side of things in just a minute, of abstracts and all things like that. But the key thing here to remember is that to push the button to say, I would like to submit to this conference, it may take you days to prepare for it, but it's only going to take you 20 seconds to push that button and make that decision to change everything that you're doing. Okay. And you can think back to any of your big decisions in life, any of the big things that you've done. You've probably said to yourself, I really shouldn't do this, or this is a terrible idea, or I can't do this, or something like that. One of those things, and you probably said, okay, I'm just going to find a way to do it. And if I do that, and I do that one step, it's going to make all the difference. And it did. It probably changed your life. The hardest things that you've done really changed your life in some way, shape, or form. And that's because of 20 seconds of courage. So I suggest to everybody, how do you overcome it? You overcome it with 20 seconds of courage. That's what you do. Okay, any other questions on this one? All right. So this is my favorite one. I love this whenever I get a brand new speaker. Whenever I get a new speaker, whenever I get an introvert, whenever I get somebody that says, I have nothing to offer, okay? I can tell you right now, everyone has something to offer when it comes to presentations and it comes to the community. If you are brand new, if you've been doing your job as a database person or as an engineer for 2 years, I guarantee you, you have a perspective that someone like myself that has 15 years of experience probably doesn't have, because I can't remember 15 years ago when I had 2 years of experience. I can't remember it anymore. So yes, you have something to offer. What you have to offer is a story. And this is where I talk about Lord of the Rings. I just recently rewatched Lord of the Rings and I completely forgot this analogy, but I got to tell you, it's the best analogy I just came up with. What do you think about all the hobbits said I had nothing to offer? What if Bilbo and Frodo said, I have nothing to offer and I'm not going to take the ring? Okay, there'd be no story, there'd be no quest, there'd be no anything, because they didn't believe that they had something to offer. But in reality, they did. They were one of the key players in the entire story, in the entire saga, all because they figured out they had something to offer and they had something different than everybody else. That's the most important thing. So you have a story to tell. I guarantee you, you have a story to tell. No matter what, you have something. And all you have to do is write down one of those stories and use it as a presentation or talk about it in presentations. Someone's got to eat all that breakfast. Yes, that's true, Fitz. The other key thing that I talk about in this slide is that tell a story. I've already told several stories as we've been talking here a little bit, and I'm going to tell more as I go through. You will remember stories more than you remember slides and facts and figures. A story is compelling. You should always, always tell a story in your presentations. And again, people will say, I don't know how to tell a story. I'm like, yes, you do. You can tell a story about, you know, Frodo or the ring or something else. You can tell it about a great movie that you saw once. You can tell it about a story about a movie called I Bought a Zoo. These are all stories that will stick with you no matter what, and will stick with your attendees. So tell a story makes all the difference. Okay, questions on this one? Basically, this is the imposter syndrome that a lot of people have too, is that I have nothing to offer. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm standing up here. I get this a lot too from people that are said, I'm scared that somebody else is going to know something in the audience that I don't know. Okay, I'll talk about this in a minute, but I don't know is a valid answer to a question in a presentation. There's nothing wrong with an I don't know, as long as you use it properly. Okay, so we'll talk about it in just a second. Questions? They will, and that's still cool, yes. I'm just commenting on Fitz's chat here as we go. Okay, so this is the next one on how to overcome. This is really a big thing about overcoming. And this one I'm kind of stealing from two places. I'm going to talk about a book here in a minute called How to Change Anything that talks about scripts, but there's also a very important group of people out there that use this very heavily as well, and they're called alcoholics. If you ever have met an alcoholic from an Alcoholics Anonymous or something else, they are taught to use scripts to try to keep themselves from their addictions. Okay, it's one of their ways of trying to cope with an addiction of some sort. You tell yourself a script. Their script may go something like, if I go and actually have a drink, it's not going to be just one drink. It's going to be, I'm going to be drunk. I'm then going to be destitute. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my family, everything else. That's the script they tell them. I'm not asking any of you to use that script on yourself, but I'm asking you to use a script on yourself that says, if I don't present, or if I present, I will gain these items. I will gain the community. I will gain support. I will gain a better career chance. You know, all of these things that come to you have to be part of your script. That way, when you're scared to push that button and you keep telling yourself over and over again in your head will always say to you, don't do it. It'll say, be careful, don't do it. You have to tell yourself a script that says, no, 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 I'm going to do this because I want these things. Here's a personal story that I just did. I love to create lists and plans and projects and stuff like that. So I have wanted, when I was a kid, I owned a 1965 Mustang. It was the first car I ever bought. Loved it to death. I sold it for like 800 bucks. Like anybody that's had a classic car, why'd you ever sell it? Well, money. You got to do these things. So recently I decided I'm financially stable. I'm in a better spot. I have a garage, everything else. I'm like, I'm going to buy another Mustang. But I said to myself, I'm not going to buy another Mustang until I do these things on my list. And I made that list my work to get something done. So I made it as my reward, but it was also the script in my head. I said, as I would go onto KSL and everything else and look for these Mustangs, it said, I cannot buy this yet until list number 5, 6, and 7 are done. I could not do it. So every time I tried to click on a car to say I wanted to buy it or something else, I had to get that list done. So I do now. I'm a proud owner of a 69 Mustang sitting in my garage. I do have 5, 6, and 7 done. I do not have 8, 9, and 10 though. So it's not going to get some work done until 8, 9, and 10 are done. But the point here is that you have to use a script to help yourself get over these things and what you're going to do. What I used here, be specific and be blunt. I cannot stress this enough. Do not lie to yourself in your script. And this is a script in your head. You do not lie to yourself in your head. I mean, it's not going to work. And do not say something like, well, if I get these things done, or when I get this done. No, if this is not done, I cannot do this. It's got to be specific. It's got to be hard, because otherwise it's not going to work. And again, you can read all about this. And again, if you want to go out to Alcoholics Anonymous, they'll talk about it totally. You can read all about it there. Or in the book I'm about to suggest has a lot of suggestions on this as well too. So, and that's one personally that I like to use. I love this book. I've read it 2 or 3 times, and I've got a whole presentation around that too as well. But make a script, run it in your head over and over again, something easy to say, something you've memorized, write it down first. But then once you've said it 20 times to yourself, you're going to memorize it, but you got to do it every time it comes up. Every time you say to yourself, I don't know if I can submit to that conference. I don't know if I can submit to that meetup. I don't know if I can do these things. Yes, you can. You have to get your script out and tell yourself that over and over again. Okay. That's what the introverts need more than anything else to remind themselves. Questions on the script or anything that anybody's done that's done similar to this? Okay. All right. So here's some of the big steps. Now we're going to get into the part of getting ready for a presentation to the community, presentation to your brown bag lunch group at work, presentation to a lot of people, small people, whatever it may be. This is some of the steps that you need to do to get some of those things going. Okay. And this is the book I was talking about earlier. It's called Change Anything. This is probably one of my favorite books to really help you, guide you on your journey of whatever you're trying to do. And funny enough, it was written right here in Utah by some gentleman up in Alpine. So it's really interesting. Like I said, I've probably read it, I don't know, 4 or 5 times at least, maybe 6 or 7. And I frequently go back to it any chance I can get. Welcome, Casey. We're just getting through the presentation. Just jump into questions anytime you have them, okay? So the first steps you want to start with anything is what I said earlier. Start with why. Make sure you got that. Okay. Have passion. Whenever someone says to me is what is the first thing I should present on? The first thing you should be presenting on is whatever you're most passionate about. My first presentation I ever gave was how to figure out performance counters for SQL Server. This was way back in 2002, somewhere around there. It was a horrible presentation. I didn't know what I was doing, but it looked like I did a good job because I was very passionate about it. I was very driven. When you are passionate about something, it will show in your presentation. If you are doing a presentation on something you really don't want to do, you're not going to do it. You're absolutely not going to do it. And I will tell you in the future, you should totally do presentations on things you want to learn, but your first one should be what you're most passionate about. No questions ever. It should always be what you're most passionate about. Okay. I mentioned here, tell a story. I've already talked about that a whole bunch. If you want to see the master storyteller for presentations, go look up David Phillips on YouTube. He is one of the best. If you watch his presentations, he'll drive you nuts because he'll tell a story and stop in the middle of it. And you're like, what happened? And he won't tell you. But it's wonderful. Go watch any of his stuff and you can learn a ton from him. The next one that I have on here is pause the introvert. And this one I have to tell the good story of my friend Andrea. If you're in the SQL Server community, you've probably met Andrea before. Andrea goes around as a princess. And what do I mean by that? I mean, she's in a full princess gown, tiara, everything else. She runs the SQL Server users group in the past, and she would present and do things in this princess gown all the time, the princess gown. The funny thing is that she's an introvert. She literally, after she does these things and stuff, she will go and like not talk to people for hours. Like she'll do the presentation, she'll do the meeting, then she'll go home and she'll be like, don't talk to me. Let me go off into my corner. Let me go do something. Every conference we went to, conferences were 3 or 4 day events. She'd be like, yeah, from like Sunday until Tuesday the next day, I didn't talk to anybody, nobody. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to have the ability to hit a pause for a certain amount of time and tell yourself, once again, that script in your head says, I'm going to pause this for right now. I'm okay. I can talk for this time. I can do these things. And then I will get my time for peace. I will get, for me, photography. I will go and do something else. I will go and take my time away. On Sunday, next Sunday, after our conference, the Big Mountain Data and Dev Conference, I will be spending most of that day by myself, because the first 2 days I will be spending it in front of people, talking to people, working on stuff and everything else. I will most likely veg out in my chair, watch some sort of movies all day long, and probably do nothing else, because I have to restore my time from being an introvert and things like that. So there's nothing wrong with this. You just got to establish it and say, yep, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it, so that you have a schedule. Okay, pausing the introvert is not a bad thing. And the last one I'll put in here is willpower is not the answer. Change Anything talks about this a lot. A lot of people will say to you, if you just had more will, you could do this. That's not true. That's a big lie. Okay, that's where the scripts come in. All the will in the world will not fix an addiction or fix script, or something else. It will not do it. So willpower is not the answer. You must come up with a script. You must come up with other things that help you to do that. Robert and I actually were chatting right before this, and I said, when the pandemic started, I did a lot less exercise. I didn't get up and walk as much, but I forced myself now to use my standing desk even more. And I have little timers on it, and I have schedules, and I try to keep those things so that I can force myself to get up and exercise and move a little bit more. If I just have willpower, I'll just sit in my chair all day long. Willpower will not solve it. It will not solve it. You've got to use scripts in your head to say, I've got to do it, and I've got to do it in these ways. Okay. Willpower would have never gotten me to buy that Mustang or something else. I had to go through a script in my head and say, I'm going to do these things, and then that's when I'm going to do it. So willpower is not the answer. Okay. Any other questions on this? Like I said, if you have not checked out this book, it's on Audible. I can't suggest it enough. It's about 5.5 hours. It's really, really good book. Fitz asks, but Pat, aren't you just tricking yourself into doing something? That is an excellent question, Fitz. Are you tricking yourself into doing something? Yes, you absolutely are. You are 100% telling yourself you want to do this, but the point is that you want to do it. You want to do whatever that end result is, whether that is, again, a new career change, financial, health, whatever it may be. It's something you want. It's just the means to get to what you want. That's why the book calls it Change Anything, because you're trying to change your habits to do whatever it is you actually want to do. So excellent point, Fitz. Thank you for bringing it up. Okay, any other questions on this one right now? Okay, I got to stay on the right slides. All right, so let's talk about abstracts and submissions. Funny enough, this picture is me at the Big Mountain Data and Dev Conference, I want to say 3 years ago. Actually, is Fitz in the audience? He is. He's right back there, four rows back. Abstracts and submissions. Whenever you submit to an event, submit multiple sessions. Now, this does not mean that you're going to get multiple submissions. It means that you are giving the opportunities for the organizers to choose a session that maybe somebody else did as well. This is a way for you to get a better chance of getting that session you want. Okay, you can say, this is my preferred session. This is what I would really like to present on. But regardless of what you do, you should always submit multiple sessions no matter what. Now, if you're doing a user group meeting, don't worry about multiple sessions. That's not a thing. It's just for conferences. But if you're doing a conference, always submit multiple sessions. I typically do 3. Now you're saying to yourself, are you crazy? I can barely even get one ready and get going. How can I get 3 of them get going? You just got to spend the time to do multiple ones if you can. If you can only do one, then do one. But if you have a choice, put in multiple sessions whenever you can. Okay. And I won't go over all of these things specifically because you're going to read these bullet points. Some of these bullet points are very, very specific. The big things on your submission is really just recheck it, have someone else read it. It only takes a few minutes. I can't tell you how many proposal committees I've been on where people are literally starting to reject people just because they had spelling errors. And while I don't always agree with it, in other words, I'm like, well, we can just correct them, but they see it as a big black mark sometimes. So do keep those things in mind and proofread and things like that. Writing the audience for it. This is where my friend Brent Ozar does a really, really good job of describing how you should write abstracts and stuff. And if you get a chance, look up his writings on this. But basically, you're writing for who you want to be in there, not who the audience is, but who you intend for the audience to be. If you don't want a database engineer like myself in your development talk, then make sure you say things. This is really meant for people that are doing development in these languages. Be specific, say, this is what I want. Because then if someone shows up like myself and complains and says, you didn't tell me that it was for this, it means they didn't read the description. If they did read the description, they'd say, well, I don't want to go to that session because it's not related to me. So it's how you make sure that you get some good reviews and stuff like that. Short and descriptive, another good thing to do. Questions on abstracts and submissions. Okay. Prep. Whenever you're trying to get ready to prep, this is where I mentioned, tell a story. That link right there, that little bit.ly link, and I can send out I'll post in Meetup the actual slides, but again, this is on YouTube, so you can look it up that way. That goes to David's presentation and YouTube to tell a story, how you tell a story and things like that. On these things, on the prep, the most important thing I can tell you on prep is always try to present it 3 times before you have done it, okay, for the big stage. So maybe that is, the first one is to your team members. Maybe it's just simply to a brown bag lunch where there's just a few other people. Maybe the first presentation is to your wife or kids or, your dog or something like that. I can tell you right now, you'll probably put them to sleep, but that's okay. They may not be technical. Well, regardless of what you do, when you prep, always say the words. I have this wonderful story that years ago, I think it was 3.5 years ago, I just started at the company I'm at, Podium right now. And I went in really, really early one morning because I was getting ready to do a keynote for my kids conference. And I was really trying to practice this keynote at home and stuff, but I wanted to practice it one more time. So I went into one of the boardrooms and I literally closed the doors and everything else. And I started presenting to an empty room. And I started speaking and talking. And one of my bosses came in and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm practicing my presentation. And they just thought it was odd that I was talking to this empty room. But the reason you talk to an empty room is 2 reasons. One, the more times you say these words, the better chance you have to memorize it. So 3 times is a good chance to memorize it. So you're not reading your slides too much. That's one of the goals that you want. Number 2, you figure out your actual timing. If you say to yourself, well, I'm going to take 40 minutes and I think this time is going to take about 15 minutes. If you don't actually say what you're going to say, you can't truly time yourself. Guessing that you're going to speak and take up 15 minutes is not the answer. You need to speak and figure out how long it actually took you to say these things. When I got on earlier, I said, I have less than a full hard hour of this, and that's true. I can do this in different times because I've practiced this in many different ways. So always think about that when you're doing your prep. Always try to say it beforehand at least 3 times. Now, again, the meetup can be one of those times. A meetup is a great place for you to practice these sort of things. We don't expect the perfect presentation at a meetup. We expect a good presentation, but nothing perfect, nothing terribly, amazing or exciting. It can be a very new thing, like what I'm doing here today. When you go to a conference, that's where you should probably be a little more prepared. You should be showing up a little bit better, and that's where you should be getting ready for it. But as long as you speak it 3 times, you're pretty much okay. For that KidsCon event, I ended up doing it that morning. I did it twice the night before and ended up doing very well on stage, and the kids loved it. So I didn't run over my time that time. I actually went, I think, 30 seconds less. So if you're ever doing a keynote, just know that you're going to probably talk faster. Hopefully you're not doing a keynote anytime soon. Other big things on here, like I said, presenting, gather your facts, know your information. Again, do not be scared of the I don't know, or that somebody's going to know something better. I have yet to be in a room where there was not smarter people than me. And it's just that simple. They're going to be smarter than you. They're going to have an answer that you don't have. It's just that that's the way it is. You cannot answer every question, period. So don't try to fight it. Just accept it and then move on so that you can work with it. Okay, if you're going to run a demo, this is probably the simplest slide I have. I can't stress this enough. I'll tell a wonderful story on this one. My good friend, now I just forgot my good friend's name, but I'll just call him John. My good friend John, he was doing a lot of presentations all over the country. He had done 30 in 1 year, different conferences and stuff like that. He came to our event, had it all ready. He did a couple of little tests right beforehand in the green room. Everything was good. And then he got to the stage and it still crashed on him. His demo and his test environment still bombed on him even after that. Even after a person that's done this hundreds of times, he still had a crash that happened as well. I've also had a speaker that was doing the opening keynote to one of my big mountain data conferences, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, he was finishing his presentation, which I never suggest. Don't ever wait that long to finish your presentation, but he was doing it. And then his hard drive crashed and he had to recreate the presentation before 9 a.m. when he got on stage. And he still killed it because he's a really good presenter, but please don't ever do that. Your speakers and your organizers like myself have heart attacks whenever you tell us that. So the point is that if you're going to do a demo, have a backup of some sort. The backup could be screenshots. It could be another USB drive that has your presentation on it, just something that gives you a backup. I'm not saying you have to have a full another laptop going or anything like that, but something that makes you feel good that you have a backup in case something happens, okay? Something that gives you that ability. Screenshots are a way. Also, when you're demoing, one of the universal rules in demoing is that as soon as you demo and something crashes, apologize once, try to fix it. If it doesn't work, go on, move on from your demo. Do not apologize all throughout the session over and over again. I've had many complaints from attendees that said the person just said, I'm sorry all the way through, and all they talked about was the demo that failed. So the rest of the presentation was lost because all they talked about was the demo that failed. See, that doesn't work. You've got to apologize once, say, okay, this is what happened, and then move forward and just keep going. You cannot just ruin your entire presentation because of one demo failure. Okay. Questions on demos? Okay. Day of prep. Just for the record, this is not my day of prep. I do not drink this many bottles of alcohol before I go on stage. Only sometimes, not every time. But no, this was a picture of me prepping for a party that was at my house. So that's why I use my preparation picture. I do have to caveat that every single time I put it up there though, because several people have asked me, that's how you prep for a presentation? I'm like, no, not anymore. So anyways, make sure you confirm with your organizers. Make sure you talk to them. I can tell you from putting on 30 of these events now, every time I start an event, I'm like, has they confirmed? Have they confirmed? Are they in their room? Are they actually there? Have they been on site yet? If you ever ask me at a conference, you'll see me talking to someone and saying, does this person in the room? Is this person ready to go? We get very worried about that because if somebody doesn't show up, it's very hard for us to fill that at last minute. So it's something very important to do is confirm with your organizers. Check your rooms. Try to make sure that it's the same way that you did in the testing. If you've got a green room or a speaker room, test your laptop against it because again, all projectors are not created equal. You may not have the right adapter. I cannot tell you how many things that we've lost on adapters. We had one gentleman that I love to death that brings in a DVI laptop. Do you know how many laptops have DVI out on them? Like 3. So finding a DVI connection to a projector was next to impossible. So all things like that are just things that you need to know about and you need to think about is how are you going to connect and how are those things going to work. Water is really good. You've seen me take a few drinks while I'm in here. Bring a water bottle, make sure with the organizers you have something like that. A lot of people will say, energy drink or something like that too. If you want to do that beforehand, that's fine. but keep in mind that anything sugary like a Coke, any of those soda products will gum you up while you're talking. So please do not use like a Coke next to your stand or anything like that. It's a really bad idea. A lot of people like to do a hot tea or a hot water drink. That helps to lighten up your esophagus a little bit, makes it easier to talk. People have done that in the past. Whatever works for you is fine. Just stay away from sugary things. And then testing demos and testing them again, that sort of thing. Just making sure before you're getting going that you've got everything you need on the day of prep. Excuse me. Questions on this? Okay. So now we'll talk a little bit about, so that's basically all the presentation side of things, or most of it. I think I've got one more slide in here, but we'll talk about some of the communities you can go and get out to really start doing some of these things. Now that I've talked to you about how you can get above it and the introvert and everything else, here's some of the things you can do to actually get out there and make a difference. And again, I've kind of told the story about career and everything else, but let me be very specific on this. When I was the manager, when I was the leader of the SQL Server users group, which I was for several years, every time a recruiter or somebody else came to me with a job position or a consulting position, I was the first person they came to. And this wasn't just because I was the leader, it's also because I spoke and present often. So when you're up there presenting, you're seen as the expert. Once you're seen as the expert, people say, well, can you come help us do this? That's what they want. They don't, again, you may feel like you don't know what you're talking about, but as soon as you're up on that stage, they believe you do. And that's how you can lead to contracts or jobs or things in the future because they want to talk to you. So when I was a leader group president of SQL Server, I got a lot of different positions and a lot of different contract opportunities because people wanted to talk to me because they saw me as the leader of the group. They saw me as the person that knew the most information about it. Whether that was true or not, that's a big question. I definitely did not know the most out of all the people in the group, but I was the one most out there that they could see and they could talk to more than anybody else. So it's a really big reason why you should do this. So communities, Meetup is your best friend. Definitely, you're already on Big Data Utah, but check out the other meetups in the Utah area. If you ever feel like you can do a presentation, I can tell you right now, no meetup will turn you down. We are always looking for speakers and presenters to meet up. We always need more of them because it's not like we book out 10 of these people in a year. It's usually, no, we're trying to find someone next month and someone next month and so forth and so on. So we always need presentations. And you can definitely do that. Technology focused groups are things like if you are specific in the Elixir community and the Java community and the JS community, Python community, they have very specific Slacks or conferences all related to those things. So find out what it's related to your technology and then get involved in that group, whatever it may be, whatever sort of conference they do or things like that. SQL Server used to do SQL Saturdays. The Postgres conference is the one coming up in New York City. So those sort of specialized events for their software. You can look on Eventbrite. Eventbrite does have some public listings and stuff like that. So I find it every once in a while. I'll probably remove it from this slide though, because nobody really uses it that much. And then of course, our own newsletter will always tell you when things are coming up. Hopefully you already heard about the Big Mountain Data Conference from our newsletter before I mentioned it tonight. If you didn't, then you're not on our newsletter or you're not reading it. One of those two things. So. Okay, when you get up to presentation, yeah, see, I think I need to rotate these two slides. When you get up to presentation, this is where I mentioned, I don't know is a valid answer. Now, when is it a valid answer? I don't know is a valid answer when you don't know the answer, but you say something like, I really don't know the answer to that right now, but let me follow up with you. Why don't you either come chat with me afterwards or let me get your email address afterwards and I will follow up with you and figure out what the answer is and then get back to you. That's a valid answer. See, you're not leaving them hanging like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. No, you're trying to say, I'm following up and I'm figuring it out. Do not be afraid for someone else in the audience to say an answer as well. Maybe they do have the answer. Maybe the audience member can say, yep, I know exactly that if you put a primary key on that table, it will do exactly what you're asking it to do. Then I would say, thank you to that audience member. And I would tell the other person, though, make sure you test it because you're listening to the audience member. Make sure you test it and see if that works for you. So always do not be afraid of saying, I don't know. Repeating the question, another huge one. This was even more important back when we used to broadcast user group meetings out to the world. Now we do it all through Zoom essentially. So it's easy to hear the questions, but in the past, if an audience member asked a question and the speaker didn't repeat it, nobody in the Zoom call would hear it. Nobody ever heard what that question was. So repeating the question was a big, big thing. It also lets you know exactly what they were asking. So you know exactly they were saying, okay, I really wanted to know about this. And so you reiterate what the question is. So make sure you do that. The other ones are kind of simple and easy to talk about. Make sure your eyes are up, talking and moving around. I like to move around. As you can see right now, I've been moving back and forth and stuff. We use a practice on stage or when you're up in front of people called blocking. This is actually a theater thing. Basically what you do is you pick 2 points on the stage of where you are, and you only move between those 2 points. I know that I can go from here, I can go to here, and I can go back and forth, and that's it. That's all I move. I do not do anything else. I do that beforehand because I want to know that I'm not going to fall off stage. I've made sure that the 2 places I'm walking are perfectly fine. If you can do that, then you don't have to think about it. It doesn't have to take up your time. So, but for sure, no matter what, have a good presence. Anybody that hides behind their computer during a demo or anything else and they're typing and you don't see them, you're going to lose attention. People immediately go to their phones, they'll go do something else. Fitz asks, sometimes no matter how hard you try, you won't understand the question. Try for a bit, then offer to talk offline, take it for later. That's an excellent point, Fitz. Thank you. Yes, if you cannot understand the question, or if the question goes too long, there's one thing I didn't really put in here. If the question goes too long and it's taking up too much of your time for the presentation, do not be afraid to say, hey, we got to keep going with the presentation. I would love to chat with you more about this after the presentation. We can meet in the hallway and we can continue that discussion. But you control the time. Anytime someone comes to me and says that speaker went too long on their time, that was not any of the attendees' fault. It was the speaker's fault. They have to control that time. So I totally agree, Fitz, that you need to try to make sure that you say offline and talk about it later. Plug in your computer. I warn this because a lot of computers like to go to sleep in different ways. Sleep might just mean that the screen goes quiet or something else, but just a good idea to plug it in, keep it going. Be comfortable, know your audience. If you are not expected to present in a suit, don't present in a suit. It's that simple, you know, don't do it. Okay, online suggestions. I wanted to take this out. So if you're doing Zoom things, make sure that you have someone to help take questions if you can. I have the ability, I have 3 monitors up here so I could see everything going on. But if you don't have that, make sure you get someone to say, hey, can you watch the chat for me? Or can you watch Slack for me? Or there's a moderator to help you, something like that. And then make sure you share the actual app. I'm sharing just the Google slide presentation here. So that I'm only sharing that. Don't accidentally share your Outlook and your other inboxes and things like that. Share just what you want to share and test it. Virtual backgrounds are good. You don't want distracting things in your background. You know, please don't do a presentation and have an active moving background. It would probably drive people nuts. So, you know, something that works. Again, this is just a picture that I took. It's great. Not too much activity in your background, in other words, so it moves away from you. When you talk about feedback, so most important thing about feedback is really the last thing I put in here is put your armor on. When you hit that submit button, when you get that 20 minutes of courage, the other thing you've got to realize is that, oh, great, I just opened myself up to feedback because you're going to get feedback. And some of that feedback may say you sucked or this was crap or I didn't like this. Those are not constructive, but you're going to get them. You're not going to please everybody. So be prepared for that feedback. You have to put a little bit of armor on and say, I just have to accept this. Now, if it's constructive, if it said, I really hate that Pat moves around all the time while he's doing a presentation and he's moving his hands and doing all these things, that's really annoying. That's a constructive thing. It may not be something that you want to change, but it's still constructive because it's telling you exactly what's going on. So that's a good feedback to give, to tell someone that's the information. But if you just say, I really hated the presentation, it was horrible, you're not doing any good. You're not helping anybody. Yeah, there's no way to make that better. But be prepared. People will say that. I've read thousands of feedbacks, and I can tell you there's a lot of that. So follow up If you said any follow-up things, follow up. If you want to follow up totally, this is where you go to Twitter, you go to a blog post, you go to something else. This is a great way for you to build your brand and to build yourself out there in the community in the future. Is if you have a blog post, you can say, hey, I got all these questions in my presentation, here's the answers. And then somebody's got a blog to go look at to say, there's what I was wondering what was said. So that's a way for you to do it for yourself, but have some way to follow up. Okay, so here we go. Question and answers. We've asked a lot of questions all the way through here and stuff too, so we'll chat about this in a little bit. But I put this slide in to tell you one important thing. Don't do this. I would love to see the community in the world stop putting Q&A slides in there, because here's the problem. You're sitting here on this Q&A slide, you're sitting here talking with people for 10 to 15 minutes when you could be on this slide, giving them the information they need to contact you if something comes up. So you could absolutely put Q&A up here if you want or whatever, but stop doing blank Q&A slides, because I would much rather you spend 15 minutes talking to me and asking questions, and a bunch of people can take a little snapshot of this slide or something, or write me an email or something and get that information right then. So stop doing it on here and do it here. So I specifically left that QA in there to teach that you shouldn't have that. You should have, when you end, you should end just like this. Okay, you should end on your about me slide. What I usually do is I just literally copy it from my top one, put it at my bottom one. That's my ending. I'll also usually have a QR code down here where you can leave feedback for me, and that just sends off to a Google form or one of the community sites that does it, someplace that you could scan it, so that again, while you're talking, while we're questioning answers, there's your QA, your feedback form. So the other important thing, and I'm going to do this right now, I will ask, is there any final questions? Does anybody have any questions they want to bring up or anything they want to talk about on the presentation that I missed? No? Okay. So now the other thing you want to do is you want to end the presentation. Okay. Do not just keep answering questions over and over again. What you say is something like this. You say, I really appreciated everybody's time today. I really thank you for your time. I hope that you all learned something from this, and I hope to see you again at a future event. Thank you. I'm more than happy to answer more questions, but right now we are ended. And that way, now we called it done. That way, everybody that wants to leave can leave the session. They can go, they can do whatever they want. If a few people want to stay for a question, great. Now, if they want to stay for a question, that's wonderful. But if you're in person, you need to get off the stage usually. You need to say, okay, let's take some of this to the hallway and we'll discuss it there, because you could have another speaker or presenter coming in. So again, it's that whole point of making sure you end the presentation. So make sure you do a good ending and you say, this presentation is over, so everybody knows to leave. There's no awkwardness, and they go. And then whoever wants to stay or talk on Q&A, they have that ability to do so. Okay, is that clear for everybody to end? So I will say this is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your time. Nobody has to leave. What I'm going to do here really quick is I'm going to actually stop the recording, because now we can just chat a little bit and discuss the presentation, but I'm going to stop the recording for the actual, whatchamacallit, for the actual presentation side. So there we go.